One of the largest weapons in history, Heavy Gustav, was a unique piece of artillery. The super-heavy 800mm railway gun was regarded as the crowning achievement of artillery development in the German army during the Second World War. Designed by engineers at the famous Krupp firm, it was the most powerful artillery weapon in Hitler's arsenal. As so often with German weapons of that era, Heavy Gustav fired the imagination, but the gun's actual effectiveness and, above all, the resources poured into its construction in no way justified the effort. In many respects, the gun repeated the fate of the super-heavy tank Maus. It was less a weapon for real war than for propaganda, and later, after the war, for encyclopedias, reference books, novels, and popular military history. Hitler and his generals placed great hopes in this weapon, but the results achieved with the deployment of Heavy Gustav were negligible. The Heavy Gustav gun was originally conceived as a super-powerful artillery piece mounted on a railway chassis. Its primary targets were to be the French Maginot Line and the Belgian frontier forts, including the famous fortress of Ibn Email. The task of developing a weapon capable of destroying the fortifications of the Maginot Line was given personally by Adolf Hitler during a visit to the Krupp works. This happened in 1936. It is worth noting that the Krupp firm had amassed considerable experience in building super-heavy artillery since the First World War, so the choice of developer for a new super gun was an obvious one. The 800mm artillery gun, which was to hurl shells weighing around 7 tons, comparable to the weight of a light tank of the period, at its targets, was designed with vertical elevation angles of up to plus 65 degrees, and a maximum range of 35 to 45 kilometers. The specification issued for the weapon stipulated that the projectile of the new gun had to be able to penetrate 1 meter of armor plate, 7 meters of reinforced concrete, and up to 30 meters of packed earth. Work on this unique railway gun was supervised by Professor Erich Müller, who had extensive experience in designing a wide range of artillery systems. As early as 1937, the Krupp company completed the design of the super-heavy gun. In the same year, the military placed an order with the firm to manufacture this weapon. Despite the high level of development of German industry, there were serious problems. The effects of several financial crises that had shaken Germany before the war, as well as the restrictions imposed in the Weimar Republic after the First World War, made themselves felt. German industry was already struggling to supply the troops regularly with anti-aircraft artillery in standard calibers, let alone with a super-heavy weapon for which there was not a single precedent anywhere in the world. The Heavy Gustav gun was not fully assembled until 1941. By that time, the Maginot Line, which its 7-ton shells were supposed to pulverize, had long since fallen. And Fort Ibn Email, which before the war had been a particular headache for German generals, had been taken in a single day. The main role in that operation was played by just 85 paratroopers who landed on the fortress grounds in gliders. Despite its unusual construction, the weapon was officially classified as a railway gun, although it could not be moved as a single unit on the tracks. It could only be transported in several large sub-assemblies and, unlike classic railway artillery, required considerable lead time for erection and preparation. For each deployment, short special rail spurs with a curved firing track had to be built. In total, 2 guns of this type were completely assembled in Germany, Dora and Heavy Gustav. It is assumed that the second gun was named after the company's director, Gustav Krupp.
The order cost Germany 10 million Reichsmarks.
The heavy railway gun, Heavy Gustav, was a structure of truly gigantic dimensions. In the literature, its caliber is usually given as 800mm, but strictly speaking, it had a caliber of 807mm. The barrel alone weighed 400 tons and was 32 meters long. The total weight of the gun on its specially designed railway carriage was 1,350 tons. The overall length of the mounting was 47 meters, the width 7 meters, and the height 11 meters. To visualize these dimensions, the gun was only slightly lower than a 5-story building. At the same time, the barrel alone weighed more than 8 heavy German Tiger tanks. The shells with which the gun was to engage its targets were equally enormous. The high explosive shell weighed 5 tons. The concrete piercing shell weighed 7 tons. The range of the high explosive shell was up to 52 kilometers, and that of the concrete piercing shell up to 38 kilometers. The gun itself was transported to its firing site only in disassembled form. At the selected position for the 800mm gun, an entire improvised marshalling yard had to be built. The first train brought 43 wagons carrying crew personnel and camouflage equipment. This was the number of cars required when the gun was moved to its only combat mission near Sevastopol in June 1942. The second train consisted of 16 wagons carrying an assembly crane and various auxiliary equipment. A third train with 17 wagons delivered parts of the carriage and workshop gear. A fourth train with 20 wagons transported the 400-ton barrel of the artillery system and the loading mechanisms. A fifth train with 10 wagons carried shells and propellant charges. In the cars of this last train, the temperature was kept artificially at no more than 15 degrees Celsius. Preparing the firing position alone took up to 6 weeks, and assembling the railway gun itself required another 3 days or so. The gun was erected with railway cranes, each driven by engines of around 1,000 horsepower. In addition, specialists from the Krupp works, up to 20 design engineers, were permanently present on site. About 250 men were assigned directly to serving and assembling the gun. Several thousand additional workers expanded the position and carried out earthworks and engineering tasks. Around 400 soldiers formed an anti-aircraft battalion attached to the gun. According to Manstein, the position near Sevastopol was simultaneously covered by 2 flak divisions armed with 88mm anti-aircraft guns and 20mm rapid-fire cannon. Up to 500 personnel from a chemical warfare unit were also assigned. They could lay smoke screens and conceal the gun from enemy observation.
The most powerful artillery system at Hitler's disposal played almost no real role in the Second World War.
Its effect on the imagination was impressive, but its military value was minimal. After each shot, dishes were said to rattle on tables up to 3 kilometers away, yet direct hits at maximum range were almost impossible to achieve. It is estimated that Heavy Gustav fired a total of 48 standard shells at various fortifications of the besieged city of Sevastopol. The firing began in June 1942. According to different accounts, only about 5 concrete piercing shells actually hit their intended targets. The impacts of 7 shells could not be recorded by German observers at all. For the remaining 36 shells, whose impacts were observed, the dispersion in the target area was on the order of several hundred meters. Postscript. Later, Colonel General Franz Halder, then Chief of the Army General Staff, summed up the results of Heavy Gustav's employment. He called the railway gun a genuine work of art, but at the same time, useless. Fortunately for the Soviet Union, the Germans spent 10 million Reichsmarks on something that was better suited for propaganda than for real war. Had German factories instead produced an additional 250 heavy 21cm or 24cm howitzers, life at the fronts of the Second World War would have been far more difficult for Soviet soldiers. In September 1943, the gun was transported to the Army's Auxiliary Ordnance Depot in Auerswalde, near Chemnitz, and stored there. On 14th of April 1945, one day before American troops arrived, it was destroyed with explosives. In the summer of 1945, Soviet specialists examined the remains. In the autumn of the same year, they were moved to a Soviet collection point for captured materiel near Merseburg. In 1960, the gun was finally cut up and melted down.